It's Sunday afternoon in rural Switzerland in the late 1800s. A Protestant pastor sits at his desk preparing a sermon. On paper, it's all certainty, faith, moral order. The assurance that God is all present, all knowing, and that without question, God has a plan for everyone. The pastor's young son is in the room too, struggling through his math homework. His father tells him to stop being so anxious, so weak-willed, to trust that God has a plan for him, and to quit having these little anxiety attacks at school, especially when he's asked to solve equations at the chalkboard in front of everyone. "We can't afford a doctor if you keep having these little fits," the boy overhears his father telling the neighbor. The pastor may be everyone's friend, but he isn't wealthy like the Swiss merchant class he preaches to each week. Most of the time, he's consumed by worry. Worried they'll lose the house. Worried he's in the wrong place. Worried his faith isn't strong enough. This is what the boy sees day in and day out. It isn't the theology that leaves an impression. It isn't the moral certainty or the word of God. It's the man himself. The words on the page are confident, but the person writing them isn't. That disconnect lodges in the boy's mind. Many years later, the boy would use his father as a lens for understanding people. His name was Carl Jung. Jung would go on to write some of the earliest foundations of personality psychology. He would take the baton passed to him by Sigmund Freud and combine psychotherapy with a new focus on symbols and the unconscious mind. If you've ever taken a personality test at work to figure out what type you are or where your values lie, you could trace that lineage back to Jung. And indirectly, you can trace it back to Jung's father, a man who preached unflinching faith but lived with constant doubt, the opposite of the deep introspection Jung would later champion. In his memoir, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung wrote, "My father had no faith. Faith is a charisma, a gift of grace, not something that could be acquired by effort. He could not experience God." Jung didn't believe his father was lying about his belief. Rather, his father couldn't align the words he preached with what he actually felt inside. As a child, Jung didn't call this hypocrisy. He didn't have the language for it yet, but he felt the tension. The sermons promised peace to the wealthy merchants who came to listen, but the man delivering them lived in doubt. Jung came to believe this kind of quiet contradiction does something powerful to children. It teaches them the wrong lesson. Instead of absorbing the values their parents preach, children learn everything about their values their parents cannot live by.
I don't know if that's the marker of bad parenting or just all parenting, but I for certain had parents that they preached one thing or one value and they showed another. For me, for certain, my father preached that we should be very caring individuals. Like he wanted us to be involved in charity and to be like, the light is the way he put it. He was a hippie. And he also preached about like doing well academically, but he himself did not ever like extend himself for learning. Like he was not an academic at all. Like he was kind of a dropout. And on top of that, he did not do any charity whatsoever. He just got high a lot and watched Star Trek. So like his values were way off what he preached. And so I started thinking about that after you pitched this episode. What does it do to a child when a parent does not follow the values that they talk about? Can children sense that? And my gut instinct was like, absolutely they can sense that. But then I was like, well, how do we prove that? And what does that do to a kid? Like, what does that do to their relationship? So those were my father's examples.
Well, when I was reading your narrative, it made me think, was your childhood, did you feel like you were this young Jung at the table being browbeat by your parents?
Yes.
That's how I felt too. Like I was always in trouble for something. Like, And it wasn't something specific. It's just like, you need to do more, you know.
Right. Now, was that because you were in trouble all the time, or because like
I
your
think they
parents were?
they
Yeah.
perceive that as good parenting. I
Okay.
think it's just like, okay, this is very weird about I have multiple parents. My stepfather, my real father, and then my mom, who all have college degrees. They put absolutely no value on education.
That's shocking.
Even at a
Yeah.
young, even before that became, you don't have to go to college thing. Yeah, because usually they would say, "Oh, you're going to go to college." They never did. Another thing too is they were weird about sex. My mom talked to me about sex way too much, way too early, way too many times. And her overall lesson was sex ruins your life and children ruin your life.
Yeah.
So it kind of devalued me as a person a bit. And I didn't, and I've talked to my mom about it as an adult. And I said, you shouldn't say that. She still stands by those guns that having children. This is a woman who has 4 kids and has loved parenting very much and works as a school teacher. So it's really a contradicting value.
Her life is about kids, and she's like, kids are awful. Like they will ruin
Ruin your
everything.
life. And sex too. It's terrible. Which isn't true. Sex is wonderful. It's my favorite part of life. That and food. Those are my 2 favorite things.
And the parents are like, stay away from those. I remember we had an episode about finances, and like it was a long time ago, but it was we found out that most wealth does not make it to the 3rd generation down. Like if you have a really wealthy parent, their grandkids probably
Squandered.
will not see that wealth. Yeah,
Yes.
even if it's especially if it's in the form of a business, you will like those kids and those kids will not know how to run your business, even if it's well established. So that makes me think like even people whose values aren't education, like your parents were educators, did not talk about education. My parents were the opposite. They were uneducated hippies. They talked about education all the time, like it was this glowing, a thing that would solve your problems, but they didn't themselves invest anything in it or invest in us learning it. At the same time, if people's value is money, it seems like they don't talk to their kids about money, and vice versa. If their values are charity or happiness, they usually will tell their kids work harder at school. Like I don't know what it is. Are we trying to cover for our lack by like telling our kids to do the things we didn't and that we don't value enough?
And I think kids with their limited language, we don't realize how intuitive they are and how sensitive they are, especially when they're young and they're growing, their brains are developing.
Yeah.
They sense we're so calloused by rejection and by just fatigue as we get to be adults, but children aren't. They really are sponges. So how you act around them, they can feel that,
Right.
and that energy. And a lot of times with my stepdad, he would preach hard work, but then he'd be quick to dissect that you don't do anything for free, almost to just a stupidity of if you're not getting paid, you shouldn't do it, which we know successful people are exact opposite. They volunteer for everything. They do a lot of work for free.
Right. Interconnectedness. Yeah. And experience. Those are huge. Yeah, I don't. So for yourself, before we get to Jung and the science of all this, were you able to sense the difference when you were a kid? Were you able to look at your parents and be like, "Oh no, they're full of it. Like they're not telling me what they actually value."
They do. Yeah, absolutely. And I knew they were full of shit. And I kind of thought that they were just almost arrogant about their successes a bit. And I, even as a young kid, kind of felt that we got lucky a few times, like when I saw the promotions and my parents had some windfalls, and I remember them being generous with them. I remember them giving to the church anonymously, which I was always impressed by. That was something that I was genuinely impressed by.
Okay.
But thinking that I came from pretty modest stock here, and they were doing pretty well. They had a house and they had good jobs, and not that they didn't have their ups and downs.
Okay.
What about you?
I think that if my parents had preached if they lived what they preached, they would have been much more successful in life. And I think I could sense that as a kid. Um, like they tried to keep the sort of worrying things away from the kids, but then of course it would come out when it's like, oh, all of a sudden we got to move. So it's they would tell us, work hard, work on your education, be good people, and then they would piss off the wrong people, or they would not hold up their end of the bargain, or suddenly we'd have to move, and it's like, well, that evidence, the kid will at least see that, if nothing else. I believe kids are very intuitive. They can sense, I think, what a parent is feeling. Like they can observe what's happening in the household in a way where like parents don't really give them credit early on. Um, and I think that, yeah, that comes through.
Did that stability, that make you just feel very uncomfortable, that you're thinking, when is the ball going to drop? When am I going to have to change schools? When am I going to have, I mean, that's got to be kind of frightening as a kid.
Oh yeah. Like, I have now that I've read a little bit more about child development, that's one of the least, that's one of the biggest, destabilizers early in a kid's personality, is like, if you're constantly moving, or if you're in a chaotic environment, and like, if you have to face multiple moves because like you ran out of rent, and now you have to like pack up before you get evicted, it's like, that makes a kid feel like they can't trust the environment around them, which is terrifying. Like that is like that makes them, it raises their cortisol permanently, like in life. Like we have now read about like what that does when you face that kind of stress and destabilization. So
one thing I remember about my mother is that she always would have a conflict with somebody at work, and it was a daily soap opera where we'd hear about. And so my parents would come, they'd work for 10 hours every day and then come home and complain about work for 10 hours every day. And
oh,
so,
interesting.
yeah. And so that got old, and then so I saw that kind of what we talked about in our episode about toxic partners. When somebody is critical of a loved one, that time person can kind of associate that with that person trying to help them, or that person's intelligent, they're pointing out these things. And I think my parents both had that, where they have to have some kind of beef with somebody at work. And so when that person would leave, you think, oh my God, it's great. That's the conflict's gone. No, they would just hook that on somebody else.
Yeah. I've seen that in
the new boss, right? Or the new whatever, right?
Yeah. They have to, it's almost like an entertainment, or it's almost like this shows the importance of my position if I'm constantly like beefing with somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gotta be exhausting, right?
Yeah. And kids can sense that. Like they not, the thing that parents assume is kids pick up on your words, your manners, your facial expressions, everything. What they also pick up on is like the median, or like what your standard, operating is. Like if you come home every day and you've picked a fight with somebody at work every single day, it doesn't matter what you do for work. They're going to decide that, yeah, that's probably normal. Like they're going to decide picking fights and being at constant odds and having drama like that, that's normal. And they'll internalize that.
You don't get paid extra for this. Doesn't that seem like a lot of work to you?
It does.
Because I know you don't do that. I've never heard you once complain about somebody at work. I mean, you've complained about sometimes your pay, and you didn't complain about your pay. You complain about the hours when they worked you, like, I forget, it was like 80 days straight or something. But that seems about right. I mean, you should complain about that.
Yeah, when I had a union job, it was a lot of hours, and it was for a company that was pretty unscrupulous. But I'm also one of those people where, like, I think that people start drama the most when they don't have other things to do. Like, I know that there are good reasons for drama sometimes. And I know that, sometimes you got to take that home from work. Like if you're fighting for your job, or you're fighting for something that is worth fighting for, I know you have to take that home, and you got to tell your spouse.
But there's a big difference between venting and dwelling. And when it's
right,
daily, consistent, the soap operas, it just wears you out. And what I learned was it just extends your work day.
Yeah.
You're just morally outraged all the time. You can't wait to get home so you can because you can't say those things and at work. You have to wait to get home and just load them on your family and tire them out.
Right. And if you were in a fight at every job you've ever been at, and you're in a fight most months that you're at a job, the drama might not be the people around you. The drama might be you. Like it could. What's the thing that's been
Exactly.
consistent
After all
throughout this?
those years, right?
Right. The same was with my parents and their inability to hold down, job, rent, a place to live. Like at first it was like, okay, well this landlord was a jerk and this place was bad. And, but eventually it's like, oh, okay, this is a consistent behavior among, my parents. So like I as a kid, I realized it. It wasn't just it was not because I was a smart kid. I wasn't. It was, children will see the consistency and will see the repeated behavior pattern and they'll internalize it. They may not be able to think it out. Like Carl Jung in this article, he may not have been able to say my father is a hypocrite, but he definitely had the ability to like recognize that and internalize it and later on put words to it. By the way, when we were going through this, when I first was working on this article, did you recognize Carl Jung's name from any of the work tests that they give people, like the Myers-Briggs personality stuff?
Yeah, and I read through just some of his beliefs and stuff, and which is, yeah, he's definitely a father of modern day, right? Find yourself, find your why, right?
I had a insufferable coworker once who took a bunch of the personality tests, got really, really into their personality type. Like he was like a, oh God, what is it? An ENFP or something. One of those outgoing personality types on that big Myers-Briggs grid that they give it at corporate jobs. And it's supposed to make people more aware of their work style and their personality style and how they engage. What it really does is it makes them kind of chatty and gives them something to look up online. And like he came back with like, here's all these memes about his personality test, and he's like, "This is great. Look at me, like I'm this type, and our type sticks together." And it was almost like horoscopes. But also it was one of those things where like I saw it and I was like, and they started using Carl Jung's name. They're like, well, this is invented by a psychologist, so it's big news. And they're like throwing it around, and they're like, I'm a Jungian, like I'm now into this guy. And later I learned that like, no, he invented, or not invented, but he kind of fleshed out what an archetype was and fleshed out what kind of patterns we have in personality. He did not invent, like Myers-Briggs invented the Myers-Briggs test, the personality inventory. So it was one of those things where like I associated him with the wrong thing. I thought Carl Jung was the personality test guy. No, he was not. He was
got credit for it.
Right. He was an early psychologist that was Sigmund Freud's direct descendant. Not bloodline wise, but Carl Jung was like, Sigmund Freud made talk therapy a thing. Before that, psychologists did not really talk to the people who they were helping. And then after Freud took a lot of cocaine and like said everything is about sex, Carl Jung was the guy that was supposed to inherit all of Freud's, I mean, literally his practice, his patience, his method. It was supposed to be him and Freud's actual daughter, Anna Freud. They were supposed to like inherit the earth from Freud, and that did not happen. So do you want to talk about like, do you want to get into Jung and like the whole blow up with Freud and why that was a parent thing too?
Well, and you just touched on this. This is important. They met. Okay. So Sigmund Freud was 50 and famous and established. Now Carl Jung was 30 and he was a psychologist and he was coming up. So this is what, you ever met that person where you meet them and it's like time stops? And that's what happened when these two met. One's 30, one's 50. Jung's meeting his hero. This guy's famous. He's established, and they talk for 13 hours straight. Have you ever met someone like that, Joe, where you just like, oh my God, where have you been all my life?
Well, once we got talking, we didn't leave the pepper mill for a while. Like we were at a cafe talking about documentaries for a very long time.
That was because we were so curious about why the other one was so weird.
Yeah.
We had never seen another monkey like that. We're like, okay.
That could have been a large part of it.
But what you said Si- Simon Sigmund Freud, he wanted to pass the baton on, and he meets somebody who he sees as qualified, right? I think that's a huge compliment
Yeah.
because he networks with psychologists all over the world, the best. But he finally meets one that this is somebody who I can pass on, which is weird to me because they kind of have different, like you said, Sigmund Freud is big on sex, um, and he's big on kind of big on what we talked about in this earlier in this episode about your relationship with your parents, that they're very, very complicated. And I see Carl Jung more as kind of a hippie, kind of more spiritual. Do you see him as that too?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, he was into like Eastern philosophy and drawing mandalas and like talking to yogis, and like he wasn't a total hippie. He very much was into the actual hard psychology part. Statistics is what psychology is like. That's the hard part of it as a science. But he also was like, oh yeah, no, humans share all these ideas about what a hero is and what a what a matron is, and yeah, he was kind of hippie-ish to answer.
Now, Jung wanted a father-son relationship. Do you think that's kind of odd, or do you think that's because that was lacking with the way he was raised?
It's both. It's super weird. Like
it just seemed okay. I'm studying for Joe gives me my notes and gives me I practice the my reading the story part of it. And then as soon as it got a little bit gay, I thought, oh, this is good. I'm going to need another week to study this. For some reason, I went, oh, I didn't expect that. I was like, It's got really interesting.
Okay. We're at the part where I need to ask the question. When you started reading this, did you think, oh my God, did Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud have a relationship? Like, was that one of your thoughts?
Without a doubt. You can't read this stuff. You can't get that upset with anybody that you haven't slept with. I'll put it that way.
Yeah.
Usually you kind of cut it short, right? When you break up with a friend. But if it's a lover, there's a lot more feelings. And what's your take on it?
Okay, well, my take on it is I need to tell you that I fell for a very dirty April Fool's scholarly article about these two. Because I'm reading this about them. I'm with you. Like I had the same moment where I'm like, wait, okay, so Freud called Jung, my son, or at least like hinted at it, called him his heir apparent to psychology and stuff. I was like, okay, that's a little close. And then they met and they had this date where they like talked all night for 13 hours straight and psychoanalyzed each other. I'm like, whoa, that's like speed dating. Like this is getting really into it. And then one scholar I read was like, they may have had a budding sexual relationship. And I was like, well, that's crazy. I was like calling Freud, daddy basically. And I was like, that's bonkers. Like that can't be true. And then I found a podcast, and I kid you not, it was a podcast about how these two got matching tattoos. And I thought I was like what, like, and it was so convincing. And when I started listening to it, it's by 3 or 4 doctors who have a regular podcast about Jung and Jungian psychology, and like they start talking about like this sailor named Otto who kept meticulous records because at the time Swiss required them to take records of who they tattooed, and like he gave them like these Eastern like tattoos that Jung was into. And I was like, are you what? And
these guys were way more rock and roll than you think.
I know. And there's one point where they're talking about, Freud was, because I mean, like, this is not joking, but like Freud was very much sex is the reason why we have so many weird thoughts, and also why we are motivated as humans. Like he thought everything went back to sex. Jung did not believe that, but in this podcast they're like, and Freud's tattoo was a dragon and it had a phallus on it. So I'm like, it's a dragon with a dick. Oh my, this can't, no, this is. And then I looked it up and found out this was an April Fool's joke. These incredible scholars, like who normally just report the facts about Jung and Freud and stuff, they had made this joke episode. So here's how gullible I am. I read the real relationship between them, which is everything we've said so far, I read about how, this professor of psychology and history, Todd Schultz, thinks they had possibly a romantic relationship, which I'm like, okay, I buy that that's a maybe. Like, I actually think, the way their letters to each other when they broke up were so scathing and so teenager high school breakup. Like, even for these 50-year-old, scholars, I was like, this sounds ridiculous. This is all real. And then the dragon, the matching tattoos thing, that's the fake part. So, like, that's how close this was, that like people thought that people would, these scholars thought people would fall for it if they had matching tattoos, and in fact I fell for it.
I was
One,
falling
because
for it
I'm
right
dumb,
now.
but yeah,
I think they get you with the record keeping of the Swiss.
that's what
where
did
you
it.
get
Yeah, that was the fact that did it. So to rewind and answer your question, yes, I believe that if they did not have a romantic relationship, they had a very, very close, unhealthily close relationship for two aging, elderly, scholarly men who have basically invented talk therapy, psychotherapy.
well,
So
and this is the thing. So there's this thing, Abraham Lincoln. There's 25,000 books written about him, right? Some ridiculous amount. Well, there's walls of books written about these two's relationship.
yeah,
So it is interesting, and because they're so different, even if you take the sexuality stuff out of it, that they spend so much time together. One big thing is they traveled to, the night America. They traveled together, stayed in the same hotel room, which I think that's weird.
yeah.
It was a different time.
Well, they're saving.
Get
They're saving money, Todd. They're saving money.
They're both rich and famous. Get your own room.
That is funny. Okay, so when they start breaking up, and by the way, we're making a lot of jokes, but like the importance of what these two did, like they became the yin and yang of psychology. Like they became of therapy, basically. Like
Right.
they set the model and mold for what we do today to make people mentally better. So like this really is historically very important, and their breakup led to a much better system of psychology. Um, but also it took this happening to Jung for him to like realize that he had been seeking another father figure, that he had been looking for yet another father who preached one thing and their values didn't match it. Like Freud was preaching, mental health analysis. He was preaching, hard science, but in reality, Freud was just assuming everything was about sex and doing cocaine and like kind of ignoring,
Well,
like he, yeah,
he's
go
big
ahead.
on fear of death, right?
Yeah,
Fear
yeah,
of death. He even got into when he
the
got
Thanatos drive. Yeah,
and he got into that you actually wanted to kill your parents, right? You wanted to take over, right? You wanted to alpha your
yes, that is one of the stages. Yeah.
I guess I've wanted to kill my parents. I guess a little bit sometimes.
Well, I can describe this stage. The psychologist Paul Bloom has a very funny summary of this in one of his lectures. He says that the first stage is, like a kid becomes aware of and obsessed with their penis. The next stage is they realize that they have a mom and that they want to marry their mom someday. It's the Oedipal complex. And then the next stage is realizing that, their dad is standing in the way and they're going to eventually someday have to kill their dad if they want to marry their mom. And then the fear of castration sets in, according to Freud's stages. And they realize that if their dad ever wanted really, to get revenge, they would just castrate them. And they're like, okay, that's enough. I won't think about sex again until I'm, a mid-adult. So like, that's the summary Paul Bloom uses for these stages. And it's very, very funny to hear him talk about this. And that's genuinely what Freud thought kids were going through.
Well, wasn't it that fiction writer that was talking to Sigmund Freud about how his daughter, it isn't healthy for your daughter to worship you past adolescence.
Yeah.
And I really like that, because you kind of go through that stage where you just think your parents are just amazing. And then you realize they're just pieces of shit. Then you realize, well, they did the best they could. You know what I mean? But I went through that arc, you know what I mean? But Sigmund Freud's daughter was just obsessed. Daddy, 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 even when, she was older.
Yeah. The scary part with that, so There was a theory that C.S. Lewis, or actually there were many theories about how Londoners had met with Freud who were famous, and the reason for this is during World War II, Freud had to flee the Gestapo, and like when he left Germany because he was being persecuted, like with all the Jews, he managed to get away right before they locked him up. And when he came over, he started seeing people while he was basically dying of jaw cancer. He was seeing people, and there were criticisms about his relationship with his daughter because Freud was very close to Anna, his daughter. He was very we'll say this is another kind of unhealthy relationship if you look at it from a different lens, because he and his daughter psychoanalyzed each other. He actually, no, let me put it a different way. Freud psychoanalyzed his daughter. If you have ever looked up, or if you've not been through a full psychoanalysis, it means that he put her on the couch and she slowly told him absolutely everything, including what are your dreams, what are your strange, erotic urges, what are your sexual desires, what are you afraid of, what do you think might happen after death, like everything. And so asking those very, very deep questions of your kid, that's bonkers. Like, no parent should want to know all of those answers. It might come up casually as they grow up and tell you different things about themselves, and you might observe some of it, but you're not supposed to sit them on a couch and be like, now tell me all of your sexual desires, including any of them that happen to do with your parents, which is, I'm one of them. So that's unhealthy.
Well, you just
yeah.
Not,
Sorry to take over here.
I'm going to overshare here, but
okay.
I had a, again, you remember how I talked about earlier how my mom talked to me about sex way too much?
That must have been, yeah. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, when I was in middle school, I was diagnosing her with a sexually transmitted disease that I learned in health class.
Okay.
Now, think about this. I was probably in the 7th grade. How old are you in the 6th or 7th grade?
Oh, like 13, something like that?
Yeah, and I'm talking to my mom about what I think that the sexual... I'm telling you.
Like, let's go down the
chart. I don't know. Is that healthy or unhealthy?
Was your mother a child of the 60s? Like, was she a hippie?
No, she was.
Okay.
But that's a myth too. The 60s myth of everybody was a hippie and everyone was going to Woodstock is not really how it was. That was a very small. It was very conservative in that time. Most people were. There was that going on, but that was more. We should do an episode about that.
I was gonna say maybe it's just like our families, because like I remember my parents and a lot of other people's parents were like they did not filter themselves with like talking about who they were dating, their sex lives and stuff. And I was always like come on, like don't. What are we talking about? Mom, yeah, come on, shut up, like. And I was like, maybe that's our generation or that group. I'm out of your generation by a little bit, so it's like it couldn't have been that exact step there. But anyway, that is you were playing Anna Freud there, like you were on the couch. Were you uncomfortable while reading this? Like while you were going through this, did this ring is like weird to you?
The only thing, it's their relationship. I thought them traveling to America, staying in the same hotel room, and then talking about each other's dreams, to me sounds like pillow talk. Tell me about your dream. What'd you dream about? That to me seems like very. But again, they're psychologists and they're studying this stuff, so I don't know. I thought it was great. I was not uncomfortable. I enjoyed every second of it.
Yeah. When it comes to, I think this is another example of, Jung found somebody who preached a value that he wanted, like he thought was good, but actually upheld another one. And when it comes to how weird this got, you're right. I think that while reading this, I was like, what a bunch of drama queens, like what a bunch of soap opera nonsense. Like, they're analyzing each other's dreams. Oh, who gives it a rip? But then I had to remind myself that like they did not know what was important then, and so we also kind of don't know either right now. Like they were going through this, and they were having to treat everything about the mind as extraordinarily important because psychology was so young and new. It wasn't a science yet. They hadn't paired it with statistics the way they had, in modern times. They hadn't kind of figured out what worked and what didn't, and so they had to treat everything like it was very important, I think. Um, and so dreams were like, yeah, this could be very important. It felt very important. And anybody who's got a spouse that like reads too much into their own dreams knows how important it sounds to them. That when somebody wakes up and they're like, I had a dream you cheated, you're like, okay, hold on, let's talk about this. Like, don't be angry at me for something my dream self did.
And I think some of this is their celebrity too. I think some of
Yeah.
this is their ego, because they are, well established, famous people. So that they can tend to think that, you think they'd be bigger than this, though.
Yeah. I think that we're kind of getting to the part where we explain what happens when you do this to a kid, when you have a parent who their values don't match, and you realize that, and then you find another parental figure like Jung did with Freud, and their values don't match what they say, and then you do what Jung did and you have a nervous breakdown. Did you end up reading about the part about him on the lake and like how he basically just like fully broke down and had a sort of inward spiral?
No.
Okay. um I've seen this happen in real life, by the way. Like this is real, but like I have seen it where I had we had a student in our class when I was in high school who was going to be like they received scholarships and they were a academic star. It was crazy what they were doing to prepare themselves for college, and then they broke out, like burned out, had like this breakdown. They lost one of their scholarships. They went to like the first semester of college and they lost everything. Like they just drank a lot. They burned down their whole life, and then they came back and lived in the small town they had started in, and it was like the most tragic thing I'd ever seen.
Like self-sabotage times 10, right?
Yeah, and kind of when I actually went and personally talked to them, I was like, what happened? And I'm like, I know I'm like the 100th person to ask this, but like you were the one that got away. Like you were getting out. And they were like, I just burned out because like I had done all this but didn't have any support from home, and they didn't seem to give a shit. Like they told me their whole lives that like academic performance is the thing that will set me free, and it's the most important thing. But once I got there, it was like, good, go to college. Like it was like they didn't care. And that's all kids want, is they want approval and they want to know what they do matters. And this leads to real burnouts and breakdowns. Like when people go to a therapist late in life and they say, oh my God, I've been chasing the wrong job my entire life, or like, oh my God, the only thing that matters is like my relationship or my kids or my husband, or like, and I've been doing this other thing the whole time because my parents told me to. That midlife breakdown where like you go into tears, or you seclude yourself, or you have a major depression and you don't come out of it for a couple weeks. This happened to Carl Jung, the therapist psychologist that like we now base archetypes on, and had all these amazing breakthroughs, and we kind of like modeled him to make therapy work better than what Freud was doing. He went through this. Like he went to a cabin on his lake. Like he had a little cabin. And he had a full mental breakdown, and part of this was because he broke up with Freud, and Freud was like, hey, be real about this. Almost everything is about sex. Everything is about the Oedipal complex. Like whatever you think you're going through, it's probably just because you wanted to have sex with your mom and your dad was in the way. And you're telling Jung that like, oh, your dad was a preacher who didn't actually believe God was listening. That's not a big deal. It was probably about sex. And so Jung has this massive breakup. They send these messy letters that you were talking about. And then he just sort of collapses in on himself. And part of this is because the psychoanalyst community, all the therapists that were getting into this, the whole movement toward maybe we should talk to our patients to see what's wrong. It all gets shut out. Like he gets locked out of this because Freud makes him persona non grata. Basically, is like, yeah, everybody ignore Jung. He's a quack. Nobody look at him. So Jung has this breakdown. He stays at the lake. he has what he calls
I think
a
being shunned by that would do that to me too, right?
yeah, like what
Do
if
you think it
you and
was
I,
self doubt? Do you think it was
all of
self
our
doubt,
academic
or
friends,
does he feel like they're wrong, or does he feel like, does he start to doubt himself? You know,
I think he 100% doubted himself, and the reason why is because everything that he was doing in psychotherapy he got from Freud. Like, how can you not think that you're like, your job parent or your mentor? Like, how can you not think that this person gave you everything in the toolbox that you currently use? If you're using their practice and you're basically, piggybacking on their patients and you're advertising through them when they're famous, it's like, yeah, of course he's going to feel like he doesn't have anything of his own. Um, so he kind of has this. He has what he calls the confrontation with his subconscious. And what happens there is he kind of like withdraws, goes inward. I'm gonna say it. He has a high school drama moment, like when he says the confrontation with his subconscious. A lot of people in the field of psychology are like, "Yeah, go boy! Like, that's awesome. That's edgy. That's rock star." And I'm like, "No, that sounds kind of lame to me. Like, that sounds like a high schooler." I, I closed the door and turned off the lights and secluded myself. But honestly, what comes out of this is he emerges from this with the idea of archetypes, and that personality psychology as a movement kind of is born from this. And he writes down. Well, not only does he write down, different types of people and how they may behave in predictable ways. The predictable ways is the most important part, because prediction means we can build models and we can make a grid of here's these neat types of person that you will work with at work, and here's what will motivate them and how to get more money out of them. But also, like, he comes out of there talking about values, and he starts sort of remodeling, like, hey, it's not all about sex. We have these shared ideas of what people should be and what they should be doing, and we have these shared dreams, and like the collective unconscious is one of the things he talks about. And so
so I can't tell by your tone. I'm listening to your tone, real.
yeah,
Are you buying this, or are you thinking he just rebranded his content?
I think he legitimately rebuilt that element of psychology. I think
So this is real. This is stuff.
This is real.
This is usable. Yeah. This is someone who was down and said, "Hey, that's great, right?" Kind of.
Yeah, I think he legitimately rebelled, and I think he had enormous contributions into the way we do therapy today in a way where it couldn't exist without him. I think that he was the step we needed after Freud went over the deep end with his the reason why we kind of threw out a lot of Freud's teachings. Like we tossed out women are all hysteric. Everybody wants to have sex with their parents. Like we just threw that away. But we forgot that without Freud, we didn't have ideas about the subconscious. We didn't have it down on paper yet.
And what I took away from both of these guys, that even though they were in both very different camps, they both believed in listening to people and sitting them on couches and learning, right?
Yes. And that's I am very much I like stats and research. I don't like therapy as like psychologists and therapists. I don't like paying for a professional friend. I like, we look at statistics and research and we say what is proven to work. Like, what has yielded results, and their stuff
I was having some, mental health issues. And so I hired a psychologist. I went from therapist to psychologist, and that's exactly what it was. When we go in there and they said, "What do you want to talk about today?" And I look at these degrees on the wall and I'm thinking, this is $500 an hour. And I don't have a problem sharing. I don't. I will talk about things. And I understand that some people don't have that. They have that issue, but I don't. And they literally just have this very vanilla, I don't need the $500 an hour friend. I need some structure. I need a plan.
Yeah. And that's not to make too big of a side caveat or a tangent here, but that's honestly, if you are going for therapy, some people are looking for just someone to listen to them and help them unwind to their thoughts. But if you go into it knowing what you want, like if you say, I've got anxiety hardcore, I need someone to give me tools, you can find a therapist for that. You can go in and say right up front, I need tools for this, or I've got anger issues, I need you to help me with that. Like, you can find or weed out quickly therapists. Like the therapists will tell you themselves, you need to go through a few before you find the one that works for you. You need to try out a couple different therapists, find somebody who is specifically going to hand you the tools you need, and that's the one you stick with. um and we wouldn't have that model. We had in our another episode of ours, we talked about conscientiousness and like personality types, and that you can actually change your personality, and one of the quickest ways to do that is with professional help. Like you can go several, like you can move a standard deviation from the mean, is the way they put it in the industry. What that means is you can actually change yourself as a person reliably, and one of the ways to do that is find a therapist who is going to work with you in the way that you need, with those tools you need. So don't look for a professional friend. Look for somebody who has the toolbox. And this all came from Freud and Carl Jung. That this was not a model that existed before them, really. It kind of was there, but they made it into a practice in different ways. Sigmund Freud almost entirely in his early career treated women with hysteria, quote unquote. And then Jung worked at an asylum. He worked at a hospital, and he just saw just patient after patient after patient after patient, and realized that talking with them and helping them put together this mental toolbox is what helped them. Like it profoundly changed their personalities.
I'm insulted by that as a lover of women. And some of the most intelligent women I know, who are the most grounded, and I'm so much more emotional than they are. So I don't appreciate the old bitches be crazy.
Yeah, that's what it felt like.
You know what I mean? Like, that's just so insulting. Because women are so much more mature than men overall, even as children,
Oh, you haven't read Freud's most profound work, Bitches Be Crazy? Like, that is one of his books. So yeah, it's to overemphasize, like, one, that this moment was actual real. I know I'm joking a lot when I say that Carl Jung went into a cave and turned into a moody teenager while he went to battle with his unconscious. But when he came out, he invented, like I said, he didn't invent, but like he wrote about archetypes. He wrote about the collective unconscious. He wrote about motivations and drives of people, rather than it's all about sex with your parent and the Oedipal complex. And so he helped us kind of unwind the idea that, like, look, if your values don't match what you're teaching your children, it's going to really mess you up, just straight up. And that's what articles today reinforce. Like, this isn't just we learned that 100 years ago and we kind of moved on. It's like, no, we have links to articles from Psychology Today. And one of the best articles I could find about this is called "The Rebellion of the Over-Criticized Child." And this is exactly what you and I were talking about, Todd, where, like, your parent tells you, you need a good education and you need to be charitable, but then they themselves freak out about money. They barely ever work, and they never invest in learning new things. Yeah, your kid is going to get to be rebellious about that. And that's what happened with me. Is I went my early life scratching my head and being like, huh? Like you say this, you do this. But what that leads to is not just rebellion. You end up, like, holding a grudge against your parents in a certain way. Like, you now joke about, like, your mother talks sex too much, and, like, told you one thing, did the other, like did not talk enough about education, did education. It forms a grudge. It forms like a rebellion where you're like, well, you're full of shit. In this one particular instance, at least, you're full of shit. And you kind of go the other way. Like, you rebel and eventually come back. Like, you don't necessarily come back to the parent all the time, but you come back to reanalyze their thoughts, and you fix it yourself. And this usually happens after your 30s. Like, fixing what your parents were trying to teach you is a very late stage thing.
So it takes some life experience. It does. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have to get some kind of base. You have to get some kind of setting to fight, right?
Well, it takes so long for life to prove your parents wrong. Like, I mean, like, did you eventually leave rebelling against your parents and then start realizing they were right? They just weren't good at telling you how and why and living up to it?
I think they were wrong. I think the values that they were telling me were not correct. I never came back and thought, that's not how I would have treated me as a child. That alcoholic thing where you have the 3-year-old Joe, where would you take him? What would you teach him?
Yeah.
I would take that stuff out.
I think that that is not just a mismatch of values. That's just like giving wrong information. And that is something else parents are guilty of. Like, and I don't know if it's purposeful. I mean, like, I don't know. Do you think parents intend to lie? Do you think they're like, they start out and
Hmm.
they're like, okay, I'm going to lie about this thing just because I think it will make them a better person?
I think so. I think so. I think that that it's kind of what you're talking about. I think that they think that if they tell you something, that's more powerful than showing.
Okay. This, the article covers that a bit. It does say that if you get lied to, as a kid, you push back because eventually pushing back helps you become a person. Like,
And showing is so much harder than talking. You know, it really is.
yeah,
And so I know it sounds like a simplification, but it's true. Dieting is harder to do than it is to talk about it.
yeah,
And taking a college class is a lot easy. It's so easy. Like my friend who's just started college, said that, and he works a full-time job. He works at a credit union, and he's a bank manager, and he's in his 40s. And he says, well, you get this fever when you sign up for classes and you buy books and you want all these credits until the first wave of assignment come in.
right.
And so he's been preaching to his kids how important education is, and now he's overdone it. He's overcommitted himself.
Now it's blown up. What age did you start rebelling against your parents' values, or at least the ones that they said they believed in?
Mid-20s.
Okay,
So I started a bit young.
I think that's a bit late.
Oh, do you?
I
Oh no,
yeah,
you mean yeah. But I think because I just didn't have, I just couldn't. You talking about talking back and run away from
yeah.
home, that kind of
Rebelling
stuff.
versus fixing. Yeah.
I think I was still older. What about you?
Okay. 14. I was, yeah. I remember the age because I started really honestly ignoring my parents and like very seriously resenting them. Um, and I running away is one thing, but like when you start realizing that like, oh, they're not just espousing their values by saying the things that I am not. They're attacking me as my self-worth, like my identity and dignity.
I did have that in high school because I would stop answering my parents' questions. And so they would want to talk to me about my day and this and stuff, but I knew they would use that as ammunition to lecture me. So
Yeah.
I would not say anything. So I would give the silent treatment. And I did this for years.
Yeah.
And so what they thought was like, oh, we have to sit at dinner, and we have to sit at dinner every day. We have to talk about our days. But then I would realize that they would use that against me. Whatever I said would cue a lecture about.
I got lectured. I got the hours long lecture sometimes. And this article talks about if a parent has a value that they're trying to push on you and you become over criticized as a kid, you're what happens is every kid goes through this stage in at least a very small amount, even if it's a micro amount. It's, well, if I'm not good enough, then I'm just going to stop trying. Or if you think I'm not good at being, fitting into your values, screw it. I don't need them. I don't need your values. I don't need this bullshit. Um, and even if it is, even if you have a really great parent and you have a very great child and they mostly match up on everything, there will still come a moment where that kid at some point feels, I'm not living up to my parents' values or what they're saying they need from
Yes,
me.
that high GPA kid, right?
Yeah,
Or
exactly. Yeah.
you don't get accepted in the right school. It just makes it harder for you to keep that, right? And then you see
Right.
that disappointment in them. And I feel for those kids or the athletes, right? Who lose that game, and it feels like they're being over criticized even though they're already overachievers.
Right. And
I wasn't
this,
one of those, but I feel for those, those people.
no, but you went through the same process. In fact, it might have been even harsher for you if you are in a position where like you're not fitting in with your parents' values and they just keep hammering you with them and they keep lecturing you. At some point you're just like, screw it, why do I try? Like why even?
You do feel like a loser. That's
Yeah.
and then but you only get that at home. I never felt like a loser at school, but I did feel like that in my own home.
Same. Yeah. And that's what this article says, is that's normal. that feeling. I mean, it's that process is not normal. That can come from a very critical parent, but um, yeah, when you start rebelling like that, it says emotional pain and rebellion isn't just defiance. It's tied to hurt pride and compromised self worth. So what it looks like is a misbehaving kid. What it really is they're trying to grab back some of their self worth because you have pushed your values on them so hard that they're like, I'll never live up to this. There's no point to even trying.
So if you had that 80-20 rule of your childhood, how much of your time do you think that you felt that you disappointed your parents if you had that pie?
Looking back, I actually don't think I disappointed them. They did a lot of lecturing and a lot of sometimes it was like screaming lecturing. Sometimes it was just straight up anxiety and stress. I realized that I think my parents were very proud of me, but that they were so immature and that they had so many undiagnosed anxiety disorders that they did not know how to let that out in a way that was at all healthy. They took it out on their kids, and they espoused values they didn't
I like
have
that.
because of that.
And I think too that because they were moving, that bothered them more than you knew, right? When they
Yeah,
were yelling at you, it's because they couldn't hold that job and they didn't know what to say. You know what I mean? And they could
right.
feel the hammer coming down again, and they just it breaks your heart a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and I also know that it's because partly their parents were from the most prosperous generation we've seen in a very long time. Like they were guaranteed an amount of money that would support children as long as they just worked at a factory or took on
Right.
a normal job that could, normally sustain a house and kids. They grew up in the first wave of generation that couldn't do that. That like that American promise wasn't available to them, and so they lost their shit, and they did not have the education or the background to be able to support kids. So like they were mentally melting down. At the same time, they were angry about the great lie of what it took to be a prosperous American. And so and that, that lack of money and opportunity, that exposes a lot of mental disorders and instability. Like their values that they were screaming at me, that was not something that they could themselves live up to. And they should have known that. Like that, I'm not taking away the responsibility and saying that, they're forgiven, all's forgiven. It's like, no, they should have recognized that. They should have gotten the help they needed. And they should have realized that they were yelling values that did not match with, what they actually believed or practiced. um and so like there's well, first off, let's talk about how to fix this. Like, how do we fix one? What does a sharp kid look like? What does it look like when kids are realizing that we are not, actually speaking the values that we live? And how do we fix it when we want to give honest praise, and when we want to tell values to kids in a way where like they'll recognize it for what it is, and we'll follow it. um
Well,
Long ago. Yeah, go
honest
ahead.
praise. You got to talk about in your best-selling book, William Sidis.
Yeah. Well, that's one of our oldest examples now. I don't want people to like look at William Sidis and go back and be like, maybe we should raise our kids like that. William Sidis is such a train wreck of a human, and his journey is a train wreck. But the thing his parents did to almost do a Montessori style schooling was they just followed what their kid's curiosity was and gave him honest praise for the things that they liked. So the kid did his own thing in learning and getting smart and educating himself, and they just gave true and honest praise. Like they honestly were impressed by the stuff he was doing, and they honestly wanted him to continue in certain directions. So instead of going to your kid and laying out a rule book for life and saying here's the values you really need to follow, instead you just show them positive reinforcement for the things that they're doing right as often as possible. um I don't think I ever got that when I was a kid. Like, I mean,
Well, you did, but you probably got that's a waste of time. How much money can
yeah.
you make doing that? You're not going to go to college doing that, right?
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that was certainly there.
How many doors got closed that we don't know? Like
Yeah. Or I mean, like, honestly, the curse of poverty is not knowing those doors exist.
exposure, right?
Yeah. while talking to academic counselors, I learned that the highest levels of education, like big colleges, oftentimes have really great programs for kids that come from poverty, but they don't know they exist and they're not going to get told. Like you have to know to look for those doors. So not only do you have to espouse the values you want kids to take away, you have to build bridges for them. You have to like open up those opportunity doors for them because they're not just going to do well at school and that will unlock everything. You actually have to go in front of them, open up velvet ropes and doors actively, almost like as your second job for your kids as they go through process like this. Um, so they, and by the way, we're going to leave links to all this. We have good articles about how to one how to spread good values to your kids, but also we have a Harvard article which is it's called "The Children We Mean to Raise," uh, um, which is basically like it's an article about what values they see and what they take away from our teachings. The number one core finding of this, this is based on Harvard studies. Kids are not confused about what adults value. Like they really aren't. There's no tricking kids into valuing the right things that you want them to. They read our behavior correctly. In this article, they say across races, classes, and religions, most kids believe adults care more about achievement and happiness than they do about caring or forgiveness. That was their big takeaway from these studies. Is they're like, most parents, they tell you amazing grade, like truly awesome science fair project. You did great in this. Also, like, I'm very happy that you're happy. Let's go to see a concert on the weekend that you want to see to as a reward. Like they're way more concerned about achievement and rewards and like the happiness of the household. And very rarely does a parent say, nice grades, let's go volunteer at a food pantry. They don't talk about what charities are you going to save up for, young Timmy. Like the caring and fairness part, uh, um all adults say they should care, all adults say they should be fair, all adults say that they should be charitable and interconnected and emotionally available for their fellow human being. Almost no adults do that. Adults will say that and then watch mob movies where it's all about family. like where it's only about protecting and giving to your own, and it's all about giving rewards to the people directly around you. So according to this study, um children don't hear what we say matters. They hear what gets rewarded, and what they see gets rewarded the most is achievement and the people around them who you're bringing the bread, you're bringing, the work money back to. So it's like, where's that money going? Oh, it's going into our Netflix account or our Netflix payment. It's going into our cars. Like it's not going outside of our bubble. So only our bubble matters is what kids take away from that. Um, Another big finding from this was kids don't just think their parents are like this; they think everyone's are. So do you remember Affluenza Kid? Like we had a whole
Oh
episode
yes,
about.
the young man who got to live in his own house and had as much money as he wanted and drive around drunk and killed some other people. And yeah, I remember that kid.
Right,
And got off because he doesn't know wrong from right because his parents never disciplined him.
Right, exactly. And the court said that, because he does not understand right from wrong, we can't punish him like this. He wouldn't understand it. This article is talking about how, the kids don't just think that their parents are like this, where they say people should be charitable and they say they should be caring and have fairness in their life. And then they just go around and reward their own. Like they only care about their, small bubble of people and their own little family and their own friends. They don't just think that, oh, it's just my dad. It's just my parents are like this. They bought me a house and they bought me a pickup and they let me drive 80 miles an hour while drinking beer as a teenager. They don't just think that this is their parents. They think, oh, everyone must be like this. Everybody must be only out for themselves and their small, close knit, family. Um, they assume that, their peers, their teachers secretly are like their parents. They think that everybody who has these values is basically like that, that it's the social norm, and that it's the norm for society, until they grow up and realize not everyone's like this.
Did you see that though? I thought I really saw a difference, and then maybe it's because I had such a diverse group of friends from social classes when I growing up. I could see other people's parents were just they. I guess the big one when you're a kid is with their resources.
Yeah.
Did you notice a big difference? Like, oh, they just don't live. They have more clothes. They have more food. They have. They're nicer.
Oh my God. The first time you show up to like a friend's house and you realize this is their rich friend, and you're like, you've got just snacks in the, like, no one's hoarding snacks from each other. That was the weird thing for me,
right?
I was like, you've got the good food in here.
Want, you know.
Yeah, what the hell is going on here? I had that moment. But you're right. That is the killer. Like that is the thing that tells you the opposite. If your parents are like, you should be charitable and fair, and you should be, love everybody and be nice to everybody, and then in reality they're dicks to everybody, and they, they only care about their themselves and their kids and their family. You go to a friend's house, and like they're interconnected. They have a vast friend network. Their dad is constantly talking to everybody else and like doing, like networking, and you talk to the kids and they genuinely care about, like, the bus full of children that went missing in some other country. Like they show empathy and charity in a way, like, where it's like, oh, this is weird. My family, even like that, I think part of the reason too is like, if you grow up in a family like mine, which it's like they don't really care, they're kind of snarky and sarcastic. I put in the thing about the mafia, like, if your parents are into the mafia movies, it's like, well, that's a reflection of the values they care about. But we as a family, like, you pick movies and things that you care about, like that reflect the values you want. You're like, we're in this household, we are, we are pro cop, so we watch, NYPD and America's Most Wanted, and like we're pro, society and Law and Order, so we watch, these shows. My family was like pro poor people, I guess. We watch Roseanne. and we love snarkiness, so we watch Frasier. So it's like we watch things where it's like, if you don't like somebody, you cut them down with your wit, and you make a joke of everybody.
Al Bundy. What was that show? Jeez.
Oh, Married to Children. Yeah, no, we watch that too. And The Simpsons, and yeah, it's like we supposedly valued being informed and insightfulness, but were we watching the evening news? God, no. We were watching, people making jokes of each other and treating each other like garbage. So like, not only will you as a parent set the stage for, like, your kids will think everybody is valuing the same things you are. They'll assume every other parent in the world has the same values that you do. And so if you show them the wrong values, they're going to assume everybody's like that. Not only that, but the things that you choose to watch on TV and the media you guys consume and the movies you see, like everything that, like, you are subconsciously going to reflect the values that you care about in the media you pick. And the kids are going to learn from that. So it's yeah, it was weird to read this and have it be confirmed that my family was like really espousing values they did not hold up to. Like I'm not joking when I say that, like, even my grandmother would be like, oh, you should give to charity and you should give at church and you should be a generous person. And then she'd watch mob movies nonstop because she loved mobster men. And they were like, I'll kill you and everybody who isn't in my family, like, literally. So the last one we're going to share from this article is that, what kids are actually picking up on. And according to the reports in this article from Harvard, the strongest signals kids receive daily, the practical messages are praise for grades, anxiety around bad performance, celebrating the wins, and silence around kindness unless there's a problem. So, like, parents don't pick them up from school and say, who were you kind to? They say, how'd you do on the test? Kids don't get picked up from school and get asked, did you show your friends that you still value them? No, they get picked up and they get asked, how was the game? Did you hit a home run?
Win? Yeah. Did you score?
Did you win? Yeah.
Did you play? Yeah.
Yeah. How's that project going? Did you do the extra credit, all that stuff. So, the adult blind spots here are that most parents and teachers genuinely believe that caring is important. And, most adults rank caring and friendship and networking very highly. But kind of like Jung's dad, where he's like, God cares. God is watching. There's a plan for everybody. We're all here for the same reason. All of humanity is joined together in hands. We should all care about the same stuff. In reality, Jung's parents or father was like, oh my God, we're out of money. We're in debt. We're going to lose the house. My parents were like, you should care. You should be generous. You should network and be kind. And in reality, they were worrying about the same things. And your parents had their own anxieties and about sex and STDs. It feels like everybody I've talked to about this episode, by the way, in prepping for this, had the same story. They're like, yes, my parents told me one thing, and what they really actually cared about and said they cared about were, their own bullshit, and also how'd I do at school? Did I make the grade? Like was I good enough? And the achievement was the only thing that mattered. In short, children here, be kind, but what they feel is don't mess up. Which is a message of anxiety, and they're learning from that pressure.
Be perfect.
Yeah.
You've been listening to The Re-Engineered You. Thank you so much for listening to the show. You mean the world to us.
You can find us at www.re-engineeredyou.com. That's where we have research links, show notes, feedback, and information for any episodes that we have prior. Go look those up, please.
We're not experts in anything, but we've got an opinion on everything.